Hello and welcome to another episode of the Northern Wine Guy podcast show. It's that very exciting series, which is what bottle is on your table tonight. As I mentioned to all my guests, it did take me an awful long time to think about that title. But I'm fascinated and thrilled to have my latest guest on the show. It is none other than Anne McHale, Master of Wine. And if you do not know her, I mean, it's criminal that you don't know her if you don't know her. But if you don't know her, she's a Master of Wine communicator and consultant based in London, but born and brought up in Belfast, Northern Ireland. She went on to read French and classics at Christ College, Cambridge. And after graduating with first class honours, moved to London and joined the wine trade. So I'm excited to find out all about how that transition came about and what happened then. Obviously, there's lots of businesses that she's worked with in the past, huge names, Berry Brothers and Rudd, obviously, towards the end before she moved to her own consultancy and was there for a decade as the integral part of the wine school team. But prior to that, has been with brands like New Zealand Wines, John Lewis Partnership, huge names. So I'm excited to find out a little bit more about that as well, and how she found the change and transition from those roles into creating her consultancy. As I mentioned, Anne established her own consultancy back in 2016. It's a consultancy in educational business, enjoying a varied, as is the case, I think, in wine as well, but a varied and exciting career, sort of stemming from design and ambassadorial work for brands and wine regions through to wine education. And what I really need to hear about a little bit more later, I think, is this diploma therapy, because I'm stuck right in the middle of D3 and I need some diploma therapy. So hopefully you can give me that. But she's also been the chair of the Institute of Masters of Wine events committee from 2020 to 2023 as well. So I'm not sure really how she's had the time to do all this, but we'll find out a little bit more. And thank you so much for being on the show. It's my absolute pleasure and really appreciate the time spent today with you.
Thank you, Andy, and thank you for inviting me to have this chat with you. I'm very much looking forward to it.
That's amazing. And so I want to sort of drag you completely back. You were at Cambridge University, getting no less than a first class honours degree. So I must say, very impressive as well. What sort of, had you already thought about the progression into industries and wine and the drinks industry more generally at that point at university when you were studying French and classics, or was it a synergy because you were using obviously some of those key core skills, especially French, of course, into wine as well? Or how did that come about for you?
It was a happy accident, I would say. I actually was going through some old paperwork not long ago, and I found this thing that I had to write as an 18-year-old, with what I wanted to do with my future career. And all I knew at that stage was that I was hoping to go to university. And then I think I wrote something like, and then proceed to employment, the nature of which I am not yet sure. that, that summed it up. And I went to the career service at the end of my final year in Cambridge and said, what should I do? Here's what I'm interested in. And to be honest, they weren't that helpful in the sense that they just listed all the kind of standard careers. And I said, no, 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 and no to all of that. And and they said, well, I'm sorry, we can't really help you any further. So I moved to London and got a flat share with a group of friends from university and just applied for various jobs. And because I could speak French, I thought, okay, well, this is a core skill that I have. So I will look for jobs where they say we need a French speaker in the job description, and went for lots of interviews. And the first job I got offered was in a small wine importer based in London, and they were called Mistral Wines. And as you can probably guess from the name, they specialized in the wines of the Rhone Valley and southern France. And they required an office administrator who was fluent in spoken and written French to do all the liaising with the growers in France, liaising with the logistics people, all of that kind of thing. It wasn't a total coincidence in the sense that I had an interest in wine. So there's very much wine in my family, not in a professional sense, but my father's a great wine lover. And when he was a student in Queen's University in Belfast in the late 1960s, he founded the first ever student wine society at the
Oh,
university.
wow.
And up until that point, people in Northern Ireland didn't really drink wine. beer and whiskey, and other spirits were consumed. And I think the wine industry saw great potential, with these young kind of wine drinkers of the Student Wine Society to kind of grow the market in Northern Ireland. So they got fully funded meetings of their society and they drank first growths. He showed me actually the menu. I've written a blog about this, so people can find that on my website, because I wanted to tell his story and the story of the Wine Society. But he showed me the menu from one of their dinners, and they were drinking kind of like Chateau Lafite and Yquem and all of these things, and it was all fully funded. So it was absolutely dreamy. So as you can imagine, he spoke a lot about that when I was growing up. It was also around the time that he had met my mother. So I was always hearing these stories, oh, when we used to go to the Wine Society. And I thought, oh, well, that sounds really cool and sophisticated. So when I went to Cambridge, the first society I joined was the Wine Society. I thought it was a very sophisticated way to drink, above and beyond the usual student just necking shots or whatever. So I joined the Wine Society, but honestly, I just treated it as a bit of fun. I didn't even consider it as a career. And of course, the careers office didn't mention it as an option. So that part of it did really happen by accident. But there was this sort of, maybe it was destiny, who knows? But that's where it all started. And Mistral Wines paid for my first WSET course, and then I got the bug.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like there was definitely some aligning of the stars or something there that sort of moved you towards the wine. I would say just a little excerpt from careers advice. I'm pretty sure I had, you can either be an accountant, to no offense to the accountants, it actually wasn't too far away from my original career, or a firefighter. Now, if you've seen my physique, which you can't easily on this program, I am definitely not firefighter worthy. As much as I would like to foreseeably think that I could do that job, I probably and 100% definitely could not do. So let's just say that the careers advisors weren't necessarily the best. So I think that you can avoid from the idea that it was you've missed a trick or anything, and obviously you've not, and you found your passion and done exceptionally well as well. And so when you moved into industry, and you mentioned the Mistral as well, of course, and the sort of the start of your journey, if you like. How did that then sort of evolve into getting towards berries, and then and obviously then leading, being a leading there person there for nearly a decade as well?
So I moved from Mistral Wines into a marketing role at Wines of New Zealand. And from there, I did a brief stint, as you mentioned, with the John Lewis partnership. So that was kind of more in the customer service side. And then I joined Berry Brothers and Rudd in early 2006. And I had actually by then just signed up for the first semester of the diploma. So I joined Berry Brothers in the wine school team. Again, I was the events administrator. I think my title was assistant tasting manager and administrator. So my role was to prep all the guest lists and the tasting sheets and the place cards for each of the ticketed events where we advertised them in advance and people bought tickets, as opposed to the private or corporate events. And then on the day of the event, my role was to make sure all the wines were lined up, open all the bottles, check they weren't corked, decant anything, and then sit at the back of the room during the event while the speaker was talking and teaching people about the wines, and just learn and taste. I mean, that again, those were amazing times, because back in 2006, the prices of first growths hadn't gone up so stratospherically, and we were able to budget to put in first growths into top Bordeaux tasting events. So I would sit at the back of the room and sip away on my Lafite and my Margot, and I mean, it was wonderful. And then after I finished my diploma, the my wonderful boss, Rebecca Lamont, who still runs her own wine school today and still does a lot with Berry Brothers, decided that I was ready to teach on my own. So I kind of progressed from being the events assistant to hosting and teaching my own events. And it went from there. And then as I started to study for the Master of Wine, I got more hosting and teaching responsibilities. And it was a wonderful 10 years.
And you mentioned that so easily, as though it was just an easy drift into Master of Wine. And for those that don't really appreciate the Master of Wine, there is, I think, 419 is there now currently, or around about that 420, 430.
16 as we record. Yeah, there will be more announced in September this year.
And that's globally for anyone that's thinking that that's just sort of the UK. That's globally. And it wasn't just that you passed either. You did get the Bollinger Tasting Medal and the Wines of Austria prize for top overall candidate as well. So, higher echelons of the Master of Wine. And we've had a couple of Master of Wines on the show as well. And I'm going to ask you the same question that I asked them. And it's been very much a case of for you and for people that are listening, we try to keep this educational as well, obviously, for lots of people that are listening around WSETs and Master of Wines and the progression of understanding and building your knowledge base, because it's sort of a subject that's forever learning, I think, for all of us in terms of what you're taking on. But what do you feel brings or brought to you that the extra sort of going up to the Master of Wine from those that like myself, I suppose, that are finishing diploma level and hopefully passing it all, and then getting to like the next sort of potential level of Master of Wines? How did you think about that, and what was sort of your thought process behind it?
It was certainly something that was very terrifying and daunting for me. And when I finished the diploma, I think at that stage I thought, oh, no, never again. I've sacrificed my social life for long enough. I'd graduated from university 4 years earlier, and here I was still studying for exams every summer. I thought, what's going on? I'm supposed to be enjoying my 20s and just having a great time in London. And so I did leave a little gap. But then I was just sort of drawn in by the chance that I could progress further. I think I must have just had an ambition to do it. I thought the company's offering to sponsor me. There are lots of Masters of Wine that work in the business at Berry Brothers and Rudd, so I would have got, mentorship and support. I thought, why would I not do it? So after that short break, I plunged myself into it, and it was really difficult, to be honest, psychologically as much as anything else, because of the sheer amount of information that you have to sort of immerse yourself in, and the number of wines you have to taste, the travel that you really need to be doing. And even though I was getting sponsorship from my employer, there is extra money that you need to spend yourself on wines and travel and all that kind of thing. So I went for it because I could see the possibility of it, but it was definitely a big decision.
Yeah, I think that goes a lot aligned with a lot of other people that I've mentioned and spoken about with, as I say, to other Master of Wines. I think if you don't have that sponsorship as well, it's quite tricky because it's not a cheap sort of uptake that you're doing, and clearly it's the offset or balance of I crave more knowledge and I want to know more about the topic, and clearly I'm invested in it because I'm in loving it and thrilled to know more, and the opportunities obviously it gives you with MW after name, which there are, as we mentioned, not that many in the world, and but it's that cost benefit analysis as well. If you're not sponsored, it's still quite an uptake that you've got to do with additions, and obviously the time the time is a slight consideration as well, given diploma is crushing me slightly at the moment with the amount of time that you need to digest information, and of course it's far harder than diploma as well, so it's another level above, but it'll constantly gnaw at me, I think, personally, in terms of, so watch this space, I guess. um in terms of what you've seen, and obviously we'll come on to your consultancy business and the focus around actually assisting a lot of people that are doing, like myself, the diploma and going into that detail as well. How have you found the evolution since you've done your diploma into where it is now, and what are your thoughts on sort of the future? Because obviously I think it's far more more accessible, definitely, but I think it's far more intuitive, and you typically go to a lot more tastings and things now, and you notice or you recognize a lot of people that have been on your course or that are past members. Are you seeing that with your students coming through, in that there's just an evolution of increasing interest in taking on more knowledge around the wine industry more generally?
Certainly, in terms of how the diploma has evolved, The structure of it has changed somewhat. I think the core is still the same. You're covering the production, and then the sparkling fortified wines of the world, and then a kind of coursework assignment. So it's changed a bit, but broadly the structure is similar. But what I'm noticing is two things, probably many more people globally signing up for the diploma. And the second thing, many more people from outside the industry who, for whatever reason, perhaps they want to get into the industry, or they have some spare time. Maybe they've retired and they want to pursue this passion for wine at a very high level. So we got this really interesting mix of people these days. So when I was doing it, everyone in my class was in the wine trade.
Yep.
And now you've got kind of, because I'm a regular teacher at the WSET school in London, where I teach sessions on France. In fact, I'm going in the next couple of weeks, I'm going twice there. And so I get to encounter all these different students. And I would say it's usually it's often 50-50 people in the industry and not, which I think is really nice. Yeah, so that's one of the main things I've noticed. There's also a much bigger online presence of students communicating with each other and supporting each other. And that, of course, is naturally going to follow on from the fact that, we're all more connected online these days. When I was doing it, nobody was using, well, some people were using Facebook, but it wasn't a widely used platform at that stage. And there was no WhatsApp, there was no Instagram, all these different things that have now made it possible for people to be much more connected. So that has facilitated a great sharing of knowledge and a great ability to support each other, especially for those people who are, in locations in the world where they perhaps don't have a big community of fellow students or don't have easy access to wine samples. I think that's been a real positive development since I did it.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, just from personal experience of mine, and I work with the WSET London, but online, so I'm not into the classroom that much, but certainly the network capabilities and the globalization of the courses. A lot of the guys that I have done previous exams with are now in, Singapore, Hong Kong, you name it, it's all dotted around the world. And like you mentioned, a lot of them find it sometimes tricky with the tasting elements because they don't have the capabilities, fortunately, that we're able to do, which is to get the broad sense of tasting. So a lot of it is information share as well, and then they'll be extremely smart at doing the written questions. So they'll give me some tips and sort of tactics as to how they look at it. And I think that's great as well. There is that sort of share and community and feel like you're going to have essentially contacts, friends, network for the rest of your career as well, which is great. So it definitely feels like there's an ever expanding area, and that's sort of very nice to see, and sort of try and hook up in different parts of the world where you can, which is great.
Yeah.
I'm intrigued, Anne, though, to find out what bottle you have on your table as well, because as is the question of the series, it's always about what bottle you brought. There's no pressure at all, but I'm just absolutely intrigued. And I just for the listeners afterwards, Anne did ask if I wanted to know what the wine was that she was going to bring out, but it's going to be a surprise as you guys, because I said no, let's leave it as a surprise. And over to you.
Well, I don't know about you, Andy, but we're recording this on a school day, a weekday. And as I get older, I'm less and less able to handle, being totally focused the next day if I drink a lot of alcohol. So when I open a bottle of wine during the week, I usually go for something a bit lower in alcohol, and then I can still have a couple of glasses and feel fine the next day. Uh, but I don't like to drink stuff with residual sugar in it when I'm having it with dinner. So I'm always looking for this elusive combination of a dry style with low alcohol, but still lots of flavor and concentration. So if you had to guess, don't worry, I won't make you guess, but there is one style in the world which is almost entirely unique for combining all these attributes, and it is Hunter Valley Semillon.
Yes.
So This is a really special bottle. So if you are listening to this and you're studying for any of your WSET exams, you'll probably know that Hunter Valley Semillon is quite low alcohol. This one is actually just under 11%. And because of the unique climate in Hunter Valley, where it is almost a tropical latitude, it's at 32, 33 degrees south of the equator. So it is very hot there. But what they have is a lot of cloud cover. So what you can get is full physiological ripeness at quite a low potential alcohol level of the grapes, because photosynthesis is slowed down by the cloud cover. And I think that's really fascinating. They do also pick quite early, but the flavors are fully ripe in the grapes at these low potential alcohol levels. So you ferment to dryness and you're still only reaching 11%. Now, when the wines are young, they're quite neutral in style, but if you're prepared to wait 5, 10, even in the case of this wine, 15 years, this is a
Wow.
2009. I brought a couple of bottles of this back from a trip to Australia quite a few years ago, and this has been waiting in my wine fridge for quite a long time. When you have when you are patient with these wines, they develop a lot more complexity. Almost they take on a sort of like a oaky character. And if you were tasting them blind in an exam, an aged example, you might be thrown off course by what appears to be oakiness that's developed in the bottle. But it's actually more to do with just, you know, the flavor precursors that were in the Semillon to begin with. And yeah, I just think it's just pretty magical and special. It's also special because in the year that I passed the Master of Wine tasting exams, I got Hunter Valley Semillon in the exam. I had done so much work on being really accurate with alcohol levels that is what made me work out what it was. Because again, if you've got this wine that's high in acidity, it's got lots of what you think are oaky characteristics, it's got mouthfeel and richness, you might be tempted to go to a Chardonnay.
Yeah.
You might think it was a white Burgundy or something, but then when you realize that it's 11% alcohol, it can't be anything else. It's such a unique style. So yeah, so that's my answer. I love a midweek wine that's dry, full flavored and low in alcohol, and honestly can't beat a style like this. This one's from an estate called Pools Rock. They're not actually distributed in the UK, so as I said, I brought this one back with me. But there are some brilliant producers that are distributed in the UK and in other global markets for anyone who's listening, you know, around the world. So Tyrrell's, Brokenwood, and Mount Pleasant are three of the top names. You will probably pay less for Hunter Valley Semillon if you do buy it when it's just released and it's young. But then, of course, to get the best out of it, you have to be very patient. So ideally lock it away somewhere where you're not going to reach for it out of temptation.
Or buy more than one so that you can then compare.
Exactly.
I think that's brilliant and a fantastic selection. And we haven't had anybody in the show that's even gone into Australia as yet. Never mind Hunter Valley and never mind Semillon. So fantastic, love that, and a great expression. Also, I'm going to take that as a little tip for my tasting as well. If I can get the acidity right, then at least that gives me a hidden little tip as well. So I'm loving that. Thank you for that. My bottle, I've kind of cheated. Well, obviously, as we speak, it's English Wine Week. So I've got this lovely label, which comes from Renishaw Hall. And Renishaw Hall is based in just outside of Sheffield. So very local to me as well. So I've purposely done it, mainly because English Wine Week typically is all about the South Coast and Southeast and Southwest producing amazing wines in the UK. But we also have amazing vineyards across the whole UK, 943 at the last Wine GB announcement. I think there's now more than 1,000 actually, though. So the Renishaw Hall, one of the oldest vineyards planted back in 1972. It's a small walled single vineyard plot. It was actually the owners of the hall, and a hall is a big national trust area, so you can go and see the gardens, etc. But the owner, who's now passed away, basically always used to go to Italy, loved wine, loved wanting to bring basically Tuscany back to the UK. Clearly we can't because the climate isn't the same. So fast forward, Kieran Atkinson is the tenant farmer. He's also the winemaker of the English Wine Project. He creates Mistral Hall sparklings and stills. And if this had been if this had been showcased and released this week, this podcast, you might have seen me at the winery and the vineyard tours, just happeningly doing the tours this weekend. But basically, this is their vintage cuvee 2017. It's had 5 years on lees, predominantly Sauvignon Blanc, but a little bit of Auxerrois, which other people might know as sort of like Pinot Blanc type sort of notes slash Chardonnay, if you like to abuse the Chardonnay slightly. But it really does come across as sort of lemon and apple tart, basically, in a glass. I think it's delicious, one of the best that we've got in the UK, and I do like my UK sparklings. But given that this is sort of quite safe to close to my heart as well, love this bottle. We'll be opening it all the way through the weekend. Hopefully, lots of people will be enjoying it. We're completely full for Saturday and Sunday, and yes, yeah. So I love labels with stories, but I love the fact that it backs up as well. It's not something that's just gimmicky wine. It's a fantastic wine. Kieran has won lots of different awards, and he was actually the technical director for Rothschild originally when he finished his second degree after going to the army, coming back, then going to Plumpton, as most people seem to do if they want wine degrees in the UK. So that's my backstory and my wine for which will be open this evening before I start opening more at the weekend.
Excellent. Well, I must look out for it. I've never tasted it before, so yeah.
I will make sure the next time I see you, I have one in my hand so I can showcase it, because it's really, really beautiful, lovely, and sort of still has those lovely brioche notes, but it's very much sort of a lemon and lime, and I want to say apple sort of pie, and it's beautiful, lovely and creamy, and just delicious. Love it on a plate. But thank you very much for sharing that. And I suppose the last piece of the puzzle, and the one that I'm sort of really interested in as well, obviously given I'm a D3 student as we speak, is when you evolved from doing all of your industry roles and going to Berries and having a really successful career there, you obviously then took the step of going, right, I'm going to go it alone, I'm going to set myself up. And how was that initially? And then sort of what have you got your eyes on for the future with that as well?
So when I first left Berry Brothers and Rudd, I worked as a consultant for a hotel group. So it's an Irish hotel group called the Doyle Collection, and they had 4 UK hotels. So I was primarily working with the UK hotels. 3 of them are in London, and I was designing wine lists and training the staff and participating in all sorts of marketing promotions that we were doing. And that was really fun. So I did that for 4 years, all the while kind of building my education business on the side, teaching diploma, hosting events. But it was when the pandemic hit and hospitality kind of shut down overnight. So, naturally enough, I stopped working as a consultant for restaurants at that stage. And so I had to work out what to do. I'd already had the idea for diploma therapy, but hadn't, had the kick up the butt to implement it. The pandemic was perfect because everybody was online. I actually think that I started diploma therapy a few weeks before the first lockdown. And so I'd already got to grips with Zoom, and then suddenly everyone was using Zoom. But that was really brilliant. So it really grew during that time. And so I've pivoted since then to that being my main focus, sort of the online education offerings that I have, but I still work in other aspects of the trade, and I still host, corporate wine events and trade master classes. I have the odd private student. I help prepare the odd person for the Master of Wine exams as well, but the core of my business is helping as many diploma students as possible feel supported and confident through the process instead of completely bewildered, overwhelmed, anxious, stressed, which are emotions that I myself went through during my long journey through wine industry exams. I know how challenging it is to study when you already have a full-time job and you want to, in a streamlined way possible, to succeed at the exam. So that's my mission, is to help as many people progress through the journey with the minimum amount of stress possible.
Yeah, and I think you've summed it up. I think, well, I'm pleased that you've just said that everyone goes through those motions because, but personally, I have as well. It is an all-encompassing qualification. It's huge. It's a lot of text, a lot of learning, also tasting as well. But I kind of feel like if you've got the tasting format relatively secure, then that I give less time necessarily to that. It's just because you've got so much to get through in terms of reading. I'm in the middle of Italy at the minute, and there just seems to be a forever continuum of Italy. I know there are extreme amounts, of grape varietals in Italy, but it's more a case of things like the max yields that they have in every single different DOC, which seems to be different from one another, and it's just there's just no uniformity whatsoever. So it's vast, and then that's just Italy, and that's only one piece of the puzzle. So it's yeah, I mean, I hugely congratulate you and thank you from all diploma students for doing that because it is quite intense. And I obviously we're speaking about the 50% of people that have either sort of retired or actually are still in industry doing other things as well, and trying to factor that in and juggle that with doing the diploma as well. And even for people that are in the industry, typically they're doing other jobs within the industry whilst studying as well is very tricky. It's a big undertaking. My social skills have completely disappeared. I think since I started doing diploma because it really just does take up a lot of your time, but it's fascinating and incredibly rewarding and interesting at the same time, which I think is part of the love-hate affair that everyone has with learning the diploma, and then I'm sure with the Master of Wine as well.
Oh, absolutely. Um, I remember when I was particularly studying for the MW, my non-wine friends just stopped inviting me to things because they knew I was always going to decline. And so then my social life kind of shifted to hanging out with other MW students on Saturday mornings, doing blind tastings. Whoop! But honestly, it's all worth it when you get through it. Promise you. If anyone listening to this is struggling through the diploma or MW, it will be worth it. Stick at it.
100%. And if you want to hear from Anne as well, drop her a line, her website, annmchale.com. Have a look at it. It's amazing. It goes into lots of structured detail around how she can help and how she can formulate and how they can assist with qualifications and deep dives and success quizzes. I like the idea of success. I like that announcement, hopefully. Online tasting workshops, you name it. And actually, even for those that are listening, and we go back and sometimes we think that we're a little bit ahead of everybody as well in terms of those that are just interested in wine generally, just starting out. There's a fantastic 7-day online challenge course that Anne has on her website as well for beginners that even want to do things like ordering wine at a restaurant and understanding how to do that. And I think lots of us in the wine industry sometimes get to a point where we sometimes forget everybody else, and far from it. This is all for drop Anne a note if you're ever unsure. We're there to try and help and try and formulate ideas, thoughts, explanations for a lot of things, because there's an awful lot of different descriptions, even on things like basic things like wine labels. You go to a big raft of wines in hopefully independent wine shop if you can, and see all the various different wine bottles. There's an awful lot of information that is sat on a label that is there to be explained. And if you're not sure, ask, and actually ask there as well. People are there to help, not to try and criticize or make it funny. They want you to enjoy the wine inside it. That's the whole point.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And it's been absolutely brilliant. Thank you so much for taking up your time to be on the show today. It's been our pleasure. It's been my personal pleasure to speak to you. I look forward to seeing you. I know I saw you in the London Wine Fair doing a fantastic example of the French Mediterranean wines, and we saw all about the IGP down there, and that was fabulous, and the vast array of different styles, which was wonderful. And I definitely recommend. I did put out a little post if anyone wants to have a look at that, have a look at it on Instagram. Otherwise, feel free to ask either of us, but especially Anne. Anne has far more knowledge than I do. So I'm not saying inundate Anne, though. Anne is very busy as well. But at the same time, feel free to ask her anything. It's a fabulous region as well, and there's so much to learn about it. But Anne, brilliant speaking to you. Thank you so much. I look forward to seeing you in the near future. And thank you for your time today.
Thank you so much, Andy. Thanks for giving me the chance to chat with you, and to all the listeners, hope you keep enjoying good wine. That's what it's all about. And if anyone is a diploma student, then do visit my website and you'll find how you can get on my email list where I send out free weekly tips for diploma students on there. So do join us.
Amazing. Thank you, Anne. Bye for now.
Bye. Bye, Anne.